problem wasn't the speech my father gave that evening. It was beautiful, actually. The kind of speech that makes the whole room go quiet and reach for their napkins. He talked about legacy, about watching his children grow, about the miracle of a new life entering the family. His voice cracked right at the end, the way it always does when he's trying not to cry in public. The problem was that I was standing 12 feet away from him, holding my 9-month-old daughter Lily in my arms, and he had no idea she existed. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter as much as what happened. What matters is that I have a younger sister named Vanessa, and for as long as I can remember, Vanessa has been the sun that our entire family orbits around. I'm not saying this bitterly, or at least I'm trying not to. It's just a fact, the same way it's a fact that our house in suburban Ohio had 4 bedrooms and a leaky basement. Some things just are. Vanessa is 3 years younger than me. She has our mother's cheekbones and our father's ability to walk into a room and immediately become the most important person in it. Growing up, I was the one who got good grades quietly, while Vanessa performed the same grades loudly, with a celebration attached. I graduated summa cum laude from Ohio State. My parents took me to Applebee's. When Vanessa graduated with a regular diploma 2 years later, they rented out a private dining room at a steakhouse and invited 40 people. I told myself it didn't bother me. I got very good at telling myself things didn't bother me. I moved to Columbus for work after graduation, about 40 minutes from my parents' house in Westerville. I got a job as a project coordinator at a mid-sized marketing firm, met a man named Joel at a friend's birthday party, and slowly built a life that felt genuinely mine. Joel is the kind of person who remembers what you said you were anxious about 3 weeks ago and asks how it went. He makes coffee before I'm awake. He laughs at things that are actually funny instead of just being polite about it. We'd been together for 2 years when we found out I was pregnant. We weren't married yet. We would be, eventually, a small ceremony the following spring. But we were solid in the way that matters. The kind of solid that doesn't need a ceremony to prove it. When I saw the positive test, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried. And Joel sat down next to me on the cold tile and held my hand until I stopped. I called my mother that same evening. "That's wonderful," she said. And then, almost immediately, "Are you going to get married first?" I told her we were planning to. She said okay in the tone she uses when something is not okay with her, but she's decided to table it. We talked for 11 more minutes about Vanessa's upcoming promotion at her law firm. I hung up feeling like I'd announced something slightly embarrassing. I called my father next. He seemed genuinely happy. "That's really something, sweetheart," he said, but he was distracted, I could tell. He had Vanessa on the other line. He asked if he could call me back. He didn't call me back that night. I want to be careful here because I know how this sounds. I know the instinct is to say, well, why didn't you just push harder, call again, show up at the door? And the honest answer is, I had spent 31 years being trained not to push. When you grow up as the low-maintenance child, you learn that your needs are best expressed quietly, that making a fuss is somehow a character flaw, that the path of least resistance is the one that keeps everyone comfortable. I had internalized that so completely that I didn't even recognize it as a pattern. I thought I was just being easygoing. I thought that was a virtue, so I told myself my parents were happy, that they just showed it differently, that things would be different when the baby actually arrived and became real to them. Then Vanessa got involved. I should explain how information travels in my family. My mother is the hub. Everything goes through her. Good news, bad news, invitations, updates, complaints. My father is not a man who picks up the phone to chat. He's warm. He's present when you're in the room with him. But he does not initiate. He relies on my mother to tell him what's happening with his children. He always has. It's just how they work. And my mother and Vanessa talk every single day, sometimes twice. I didn't find out until much later exactly what Vanessa had been saying, but I know what my mother stopped saying to my father, and I know what the result was. My father, who lives 40 minutes away from me, did not know the name of my daughter until she was 9 months old. The first sign that something was wrong came about 6 weeks into my pregnancy when my mother mentioned, casually, the way you mention the weather, that she hadn't told Daddy the due date yet because she didn't want to overwhelm him with information. He'd been stressed about some work thing. I said okay. I believed her. The second sign came when I sent a card to my parents' house with my first ultrasound photo inside. My mother called to say it was lovely. My father never mentioned it. When I asked my mother if he'd seen it, she said she'd left it on his desk, but he'd been so busy. I said okay again. The third sign came when I was 7 months along and ran into my cousin Angela at the grocery store. Angela, who lives in the same town as my parents and has Sunday dinner with them twice a month. Angela looked at my very obvious pregnant belly with genuine shock. "Oh my God," she said. "I had no idea. Your mom told us you were going through some things and weren't really up for company." I stood in the cereal aisle for a long moment after she walked away. When I got home, I didn't call my mother. I called my father directly, one of the few times in recent memory that I had done this. And I asked him simply how he was doing, what was new. He talked about the yard and a book he was reading. He did not mention my pregnancy. When I mentioned it, there was a pause, and then he said something that made my stomach drop completely. "Your mother said you wanted some space right now." I had never said that. I had never said anything remotely like that. That night, Joel and I sat at our kitchen table for a long time. He's not a dramatic person, Joel. He doesn't catastrophize. But even he said quietly, "Something's not right." What I did next took everything I had because it went against every instinct I'd ever developed. I started paying attention. I started saving things. I kept the voicemails where my mother referenced giving me space. I kept the text thread where Vanessa had, casually, mentioned that I was going through something with Joel. There was nothing going on between Joel and me. We were fine, which she had apparently relayed to half the extended family as a reason I wasn't attending events. I had not been invited to most of those events. The invitations had been sent to my parents' address, the one I'd used for family correspondence since before I moved, and I had never received them. Lily was born on a Tuesday in October. She had Joel's nose and, absurdly, my grandmother's ears, which made us both laugh through tears in the delivery room. She was 7 pounds 2 ounces, and she was the most complete thing I had ever seen. My parents did not come to the hospital. My mother texted, "Heard the good news. Resting up here. Daddy's back is acting up. We'll come see you soon when you're settled." Vanessa sent a gif of a teddy bear. Soon turned into weeks. The weeks turned into months. Joel's parents drove 4 hours from Pittsburgh the day after Lily was born and stayed for a week. They held her constantly. Joel's mother cried every single time she picked her up, which was often. They babysat so Joel and I could sleep. They made us food. They were the grandparents that Lily had in those first months, and I am grateful for them in a way that goes beyond words. My parents met Lily for the first time when she was 6 weeks old, a brief Sunday visit that felt more like an inspection. My mother held her for a while and said she had Joel's eyes. My father held her for approximately 4 minutes, said she seemed healthy, and then went to watch football in the other room. He left the visit early because Vanessa had called and needed help moving some boxes. After they left, I sat in the nursery and rocked Lily for a long time, not saying anything. What I didn't know then was everything Vanessa had done. I had suspicions, a growing, uncomfortable sense that the information flow in my family had been actively manipulated. But I didn't have proof of the full scope until Lily was about 4 months old, when my cousin Angela called me. Angela had been doing some digging of her own after our grocery store encounter had sat wrong with her. She had started asking questions at those Sunday dinners. What she found out, piece by piece, was this. Vanessa had told my mother, early in my pregnancy, that I was really private about it and didn't want to fuss. My mother, who defers to Vanessa on anything involving my emotional state, accepted this. Vanessa had intercepted, that is the only word, 2 cards I'd sent to the house. A baby shower invitation I'd given to my mother to distribute to the extended family and, most devastatingly, a framed announcement photo that I'd mailed from my father to put in his office. It had never arrived at his office because it had never made it past Vanessa, who had access to my parents' house and stopped by constantly. The shower invitation was the one that broke me a little. I had planned a small gathering, nothing elaborate, just close family in our apartment. 7 people. I had given the invitations to my mother to pass along, the way we'd always done things in our family. Not one family member received theirs. When I'd called people to follow up, they'd said they hadn't heard anything, and Vanessa had quietly put it around that I'd cancelled because I was overwhelmed. They had missed my baby shower because Vanessa had thrown the invitations away. I sat with that knowledge for 5 weeks before I decided what to do with it. The timing, in the end, decided itself. Vanessa got pregnant, genuinely actually pregnant, and the family exploded with joy in the way I had always imagined my own news would be received. There was a dinner. There were tears. My father apparently cried at the table when he heard. There were already discussions about the nursery, about names, about my mother potentially working reduced hours to help with childcare. And there was an engagement party. Vanessa had gotten engaged 6 months prior, and the party was being held at my parents' house. Extended family, neighbors, some of Vanessa's law firm colleagues. Big, catered. The kind of event my family does well. I was invited, this time directly by my father, via a phone call that felt slightly awkward because we hadn't spoken much since Lily was born. He said he hoped I'd come, hoped I'd bring Lily, that he felt like they hadn't seen enough of her. I said we'd be there. Joel looked at me over the kitchen counter after I hung up. "What are you thinking?" he asked. I said, "I'm thinking I'm going to bring everything." I had spent 5 weeks building a quiet, organized record, printed text messages, screenshots with timestamps. The returned mail notice from the framed photo I'd sent. It had eventually come back to me marked undeliverable after Vanessa had apparently given a wrong forwarding note to the postal carrier. Testimony from Angela, who had written out, by hand, what she'd pieced together from those Sunday dinners. A note from Joel's mother about the 6-week visit, confirming what she'd observed. I hadn't done this to perform it. I wasn't planning a scene. What I wanted, more than any dramatic confrontation, was for my father to know the truth. He is not a bad man. He is an inattentive man, a man who accepts the version of events he's given because interrogating it feels rude and disruptive. I understood that. I was not angry at him, the way I was angry at Vanessa. I just needed him to see. The party was on a Saturday in early March. We got there about 45 minutes in, late enough that the initial rush of greetings had settled, early enough that the evening was still in full swing. I wore a grey dress I'd bought specifically for this. Lily was in a soft pink outfit Joel's mother had sent, with a headband that she immediately pulled off and handed to me with great seriousness. I walked in, carrying my daughter on my hip. My father was across the room, laughing at something one of his friends had said, a glass of wine in his hand. He saw me come in and smiled, waved. Then his eyes dropped to Lily, and I watched something complicated happen on his face. Recognition, and the dawning arithmetic of it. The calculation of how old she must be, how long it had been. He crossed the room. He said hello to me, and then he reached out and touched Lily's hand, and she grabbed his finger with the complete seriousness that 9-month-olds apply to everything. "She's gotten so big," he said, and his voice had a quality to it that I hadn't heard before when he talked about her. "She's 9 months old, Dad," I said. "She's been around for a while." He heard something in my voice. He looked at me. "Can we step outside for a few minutes?" I asked. We went out through the kitchen door to the back porch. Joel stayed inside with Lily. My mother was occupied with the caterers and hadn't seen us slip out. I handed my father the folder. Just handed it to him without a speech, without preamble. I'd thought about what to say for weeks, had written and discarded a dozen versions, and in the end, the simplest thing seemed right. He stood on the porch in the March cold and read through it slowly. I watched his face. My father is not a man who shows much, but I have spent 34 years learning to read him. And what I saw move across his face while he read was not comfortable to watch. It was the look of a person whose understanding of a period of time is being revised, page by page, into something he doesn't recognize. He got to the shower invitations. He stopped. He looked up. "She threw them away," I said quietly. "She told Mom I cancelled. Nobody came." He looked back down at the folder. He was quiet for a long time. "I thought you wanted space," he said finally. "I never said that." He closed the folder. The sounds of the party were coming through the kitchen windows. Laughter, the clink of glasses, someone telling a story too loudly. Vanessa's voice, somewhere in there, bright and carrying. "I sent you a photo for your office," I said, "of Lily. When she was 3 weeks old, it came back to me." He nodded slowly, like he was fitting something together. I never got it. I know. We stood there for another minute. Then he said, I need to talk to your mother. I know, I said, but I needed you to know first. I went back inside. Joel handed me Lily and gave me a look that asked without words, and I gave him a small nod. A little while later, I watched my father cross the room to where Vanessa was holding court with a group of relatives, laughing about something. He touched her arm. He said something quietly. Her smile changed. I didn't watch what happened next. I found my aunt and uncle and sat with them for a while, and Lily chewed on my bracelet and waved at people and was generally very charming, which she has a gift for. What happened in the following weeks was not clean or simple. My family does not do clean or simple. My mother spent a difficult few days somewhere between disbelief and grief, because Vanessa is her favorite in the way that parents aren't supposed to have favorites, but often do. And accepting what Vanessa had done meant accepting something about the way she'd allowed Vanessa to operate for years. That was hard for her. I'm not dismissing how hard it was. My father called me the Sunday after the party. He spoke for almost 20 minutes without stopping, which is unprecedented for him. He talked about the folder, about the shower, about the photo that had never made it to his desk. He said he had gone back and thought about the past year, about how many times he'd accepted "she needs space" as sufficient explanation without asking me himself. He said he was ashamed of that. He didn't use the word ashamed. He said, I should have called you myself. That's on me. That's entirely on me. For my father, that is the same thing. He came over the following Saturday morning. He sat on our living room floor with Lily for 2 hours. I have a photo of them, him cross-legged on the rug, her crawling determinedly toward him, with complete focus, his face doing something that looks very much like wonder. Joel took it when neither of them was looking. It's the background on my phone now. Vanessa and I have not spoken since the party. I don't know if we will. I've stopped trying to predict how that goes because I've been wrong about Vanessa before. Many times, in both directions. What I know is that she was asked by my father to explain herself, and that the explanation she offered was not sufficient, and that several family members who had been quietly observing for years took the party as a kind of signal to say things they'd been sitting on. Her engagement celebration became something else entirely by the end of the evening. I wasn't there for most of it. The jewelry piece. I should mention this because it was the detail that undid things most completely with the extended family. My grandmother, before she passed, had told my mother that her pearl earrings were meant to go to me, the older granddaughter. Not in writing, which has caused its own complications. Vanessa had taken them from my mother's jewelry box at some point in the previous year. My mother confirmed this when pressed, painfully, and had worn them to at least 3 events that Angela had attended and photographed on her phone. When this came out, when Angela showed the photos, something shifted in the room that I can only describe as a collective recalibration. These are people who have known our family for decades. They have been watching longer than I realized. My mother returned a pair of pearl earrings to me 2 weeks after the party. She didn't say much when she handed them over. I didn't say much either. Sometimes the gesture is the thing. Joel and I got married in May, a small outdoor ceremony at a winery in the Hocking Hills area that we'd been planning for over a year. My father walked me down the aisle. He cried at the beginning and had to collect himself, which took a while, and I held his arm and waited, and it was okay. Lily sat in the front row in a tiny white dress with Joel's mother and a flower crown that she also removed immediately, because she has a clear position on headwear. My mother gave a toast at the reception. It was lovely. She talked about the kind of love that is quiet and constant, the kind that doesn't ask for attention. I think she meant it about Joel and me. I also think, knowing my mother, that she was saying something to herself. I'm not going to tell you it's all resolved. Families don't resolve. They shift and settle and sometimes fracture along lines that were always there, just not visible. What I can tell you is that my father knows my daughter's name. He knows she took her first steps on a Friday afternoon in our kitchen and fell right into his arms because he'd been visiting, and she launched herself at him like she'd been planning it. He called me the next morning to tell me he'd been thinking about it all night. That's something. That's actually everything. What I didn't understand for most of my life is the specific harm of being the easy one. People assume you're fine. They stop checking. They let other people's louder needs fill the space. And if someone else decides to fill that space with something false, a rumor, a redirection, a quietly discarded envelope, the easy one doesn't even know it's happening until the damage is done. I'm not easy anymore. I mean that in the best possible way. I call my father directly now. I follow up. I send things certified mail, which is a small and somewhat petty detail, but also genuinely useful. I have stopped assuming that silence means things are fine. Lily is 14 months old now. She has 6 teeth, a strong opinion about which songs I'm allowed to sing at bedtime, and a particular fondness for her grandfather that I did not engineer and cannot explain. Last weekend he drove over with no specific reason, just because he was in the neighborhood, he said, and she heard his voice at the door and went absolutely sideways with excitement, in the way that only very small people and very good dogs can manage. He stayed for 3 hours. We had sandwiches. It was ordinary in every way, which is exactly what I wanted. I think about the version of this story where I stayed quiet, where I let the pattern continue, swallowed the hurt, told myself it didn't matter, where Lily grew up knowing her grandfather the way I always knew mine, politely, distantly, like a photograph of a person, rather than the person. I think about that version sometimes, and I am so grateful it is not the one I'm living. The truth is a hard thing to carry around in a folder, but it is lighter than everything else I was carrying before I handed it over. I used to think being low maintenance was a personality trait, something to be proud of. I didn't ask for much. I didn't make scenes. I didn't push. I told myself that was maturity. What I didn't see, what took me 34 years and a folder full of evidence to understand, is that being easy to overlook isn't the same as being easy to be around. It just means the people who want to erase you have a much simpler job. Vanessa didn't have to work hard. That's the part that still sits with me. She didn't have to forge anything or lie to my face or construct an elaborate story. All she had to do was intercept a few envelopes, plant a few phrases with my mother, and let my family's existing habits do the rest. My father didn't ask questions because he never had. My mother passed along what Vanessa told her because she always had. The system was already in place. Vanessa just learned to use it. That's what I mean when I say the harm of being the easy one is specific. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly accumulates, invitation by invitation, until one day you're standing in a grocery store and your cousin is looking at your 8 months pregnant belly like she's never seen you before, and you realize the gap between the life you're living and the story your family has been told is much wider than you thought. What I did, the folder, the porch, the conversation with my father in the March cold, wasn't revenge. I want to be clear about that. It wasn't about watching Vanessa face consequences, although she did. It wasn't about winning anything. It was about the simple, urgent need to be known accurately by the people who are supposed to know me. My father had a granddaughter he had never held. That was the thing I couldn't live with. Not the hurt feelings, not the missed shower, not even the pearl earrings, though those mattered. It was Lily. It was the idea that she would grow up at the edge of his awareness because someone had decided her existence was inconvenient. The piece about cause and effect that I keep coming back to is this. Vanessa's choices didn't just harm me, they shaped her. Every decision she made, every intercepted envelope, every redirected story, required her to become a person who could do those things. And that person, eventually, stood in a room full of family who had been quietly observing for years and had nowhere left to go. She didn't lose her standing in one night. She'd been spending it down, slowly, for a long time. The party was just when the account ran out, my father sitting on our living room floor with Lily, cross-legged on the rug while she crawled toward him. That image is what I come back to when the harder feelings surface. He chose to show up differently. He chose to call me directly now. Those are choices too, and they matter just as much as Vanessa's did, in the opposite direction. People can decide at any point to be more accurate versions of themselves. My father did. I'm grateful for that. What I want anyone to take from this is something I wish someone had told me earlier. Your patience is not infinite, and it shouldn't have to be. There is a difference between being kind and being compliant. There is a difference between keeping the peace and disappearing inside it. I stayed quiet for years because I thought quiet was generous. It wasn't. It was just easier for everyone else. The truth, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's constable, even when it costs something, it belongs in the room. Lily deserved to be in that room. She is in it now.